Jessica lives here now.
I just finished chemotherapy, Daniel. You already replaced me before I came home.
This stopped being your home months ago. Sign it. It's only paperwork.
You forged my signature. I'm the sole trustee of Nash Family Holdings.
Maya, what did you say?
She came home from chemotherapy, still wearing the hospital bracelet on her wrist, and found another woman's coat on the hook by the front door. Not left there carelessly, hung as if it belonged, as if it had always been there. Stood in the entryway of the house she owned and listened to laughter coming from her kitchen, and for a long moment she could not move. She had been fighting for her life for 8 months. She had no idea that while she was losing her hair in that treatment room, her husband had been quietly replacing her. Welcome to today's story. If you enjoy emotional drama and shocking twists, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more unforgettable stories. And before we begin, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. But this is not a story about a woman who was replaced. This is a story about a woman they never understood. Maya set her bag down on the entry bench, the one she had picked out at an estate sale 3 years ago, refinished herself over a weekend Daniel was traveling. She took off her shoes. She looked at the coat hanging on her hook. Then she removed her hospital bracelet and set it on the entry table. She would not need it to remind her of what she had been through. The kitchen, when she reached it, held 3 people. Daniel stood by the island with a glass of wine. Jessica Ford stood across from him in a silk blouse, one hand on the counter, completely at ease. Patricia Reeves, Daniel's mother, sat at the table Maya had bought. Helen, Daniel's sister, was opening a cabinet that had been reorganized since Maya had last seen it. None of them heard Maya come in. Then Daniel looked up. Something crossed his face. Not guilt, not quite. A kind of calculation. Maya. He set down the glass. I didn't hear you come in. How are you feeling? Fine, she said. Jessica turned. She had a careful smile, the kind practiced in front of mirrors. You must be Maya. I've heard so much about you. She said it the way people say things they do not mean. I'm Jessica Ford, Daniel's chief strategy officer. A pause. And a good friend. Maya looked at her for a moment. Then she looked at Daniel. I see, she said. Patricia rose from the table. Her hug was the kind that held you at a distance while appearing to pull you close. You look tired, darling. You really shouldn't push yourself. She stepped back and looked at Maya the way she always had, with the gentle condescension of a woman who had decided long ago that her son had married beneath him. Daniel cleared his throat. We've been talking about the arrangements. Given everything that's happening, your treatment schedule, the stress, I think it makes more sense if you use the guest room for now. The master is just too much space when you're not feeling well. Maya looked at him. It's quieter down the hall, Patricia offered, and you won't be disturbed. Maya said nothing for a moment. She was aware of Helen behind her, paused with a box of Maya's kitchen things in her arms, waiting for her to protest. She was aware of Jessica watching from the island with a stillness that was not surprise. She was aware of the way the house already smelled different, a new candle, a different dish soap, the particular scent of a place that had been rearranged without her permission. Of course, Maya said. Her voice was even. The guest room is fine. Helen exhaled. Daniel nodded, relieved in a way he tried to hide. Jessica picked up her wine again. Maya carried her own bag down the hall. The guest room had been given a surface preparation for her. Clean sheets, a folded towel on the bed. One of her own throw pillows from the couch was propped against the headboard, which struck her as a particular kind of thoughtlessness. They had remembered a pillow and forgotten a person. She sat on the edge of the bed and listened to them pick up the conversation. Where they'd left it, their voices audible through the wall. Comfortable, easy, without a care for what they had just done. She opened her bag and took out a small notebook. She'd started keeping it at the hospital, mostly to track her symptoms, later to track other things. She turned to a clean page and wrote the date. Beneath it she wrote, coat on hook, guest room, family present and comfortable, planned. That last word she underlined. She was not angry, exactly. Anger is a fire that burns through what it needs to burn through and leaves ash. What Maya felt was colder than that and more patient. She had been watching people show her who they were for a very long time, and she had learned to take careful notes. Through the wall, she heard a bottle being uncorked. Patricia's voice. "To the new chapter." Helen laughed. Daniel said something she couldn't make out. Then Jessica's voice, warm and satisfied. "Finally," Maya wrote that down too. It was close to 9 when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. The name on the screen was one she had been half expecting, Theodore Hayes. She gathered herself and walked to the back door, stepping out into the cold night air of her own yard, and answered. Mrs. Nash-Reeves. Theo's voice was quiet, precise. The kind of voice that only spoke when it had something worth saying. "I've been following the situation with some concern. I think the time has come for a conversation." A pause. About the trust. About the North Star timeline. About several things. Maya stood in the dark, the light from the kitchen window casting shadows across the garden she'd planted 2 springs ago. Through the glass, she could see Daniel's profile, animated, happy, leaning in toward Jessica with the ease of a man who believed he had solved every problem he needed to solve. "Tomorrow morning," Maya said. 8 o'clock. "I'll be at your office." She kept her voice low and steady. "And Theo, don't call this number again tonight. Someone might notice." She went back inside. Daniel didn't ask who had called. He wasn't watching the door. That night, lying in the guest room with the sounds of her own house coming through the wall, Maya opened the notebook again. She looked at the words she had underlined. Then she wrote below it, small and clear, "They are showing me. Good." The first week taught Maya more than any conversation could have. She watched from the guest room doorway each morning as the house became someone else's. Patricia and Helen arrived on the 3rd day, with a new duvet set in a pale gray that Jessica had apparently chosen. They carried it upstairs together while Daniel held open the front door, and not one of them considered whether Maya might have an opinion about what was being brought into the home she owned. She stood in the hallway with her tea and watched them go up, and when they reached the landing, Patricia glanced back at her with the expression of a woman who had just done something charitable. "Doesn't the gray feel fresh?" Patricia said. "Very," Maya said. They were good at what they did. That was the thing no one ever thought to say about a certain kind of cruelty. How practiced it was, how smooth. Within 4 days, the master bedroom had been repainted. Within 5, a decorator arrived to assess the living room. By the end of the week, there were fresh flowers on the kitchen table in a vase Maya had never seen before. Her own things were moved in stages, in increments, as though the slow pace of it made each removal less of what it was. Her books were boxed and set in the garage. Her photographs were taken from the mantel and placed in a storage bin in the hall closet, face down, as if they were something to be dealt with later. One morning, Maya came down to find a new fruit bowl on the kitchen counter in the exact spot her grandmother's ceramic had always stood. The ceramic was gone. She did not ask where. She went to chemo on Thursday and came back to find the living room furniture rearranged. Ruth Parsons came on Wednesday and again on Friday. Ruth moved through the house with her usual quiet efficiency, and when she passed Maya in the hallway, she did not say a word, but she squeezed Maya's hand once, briefly, with both of her own, and then kept walking. It was enough. Maya understood. She slept as well as the treatment allowed, which was not very well. Some nights the nausea came in waves. She kept what she needed by the bed. She dressed carefully each morning and kept her notebook on the nightstand. Every evening she wrote in it what happened, what was said, what she saw. Not out of spite, out of patience. She was a woman who had spent 8 months fighting something that had no conscience, no agenda, no preference for who it harmed. The people in her house were considerably easier to understand. On Thursday evening, she heard Daniel on the phone in the home office. The door was open. It was always open. When he was on a call, he wanted someone to believe he was important enough to be having. She was in the hallway on her way to the kitchen, and she stopped. "The Nash Family Trust controls Cascade Capital," he was saying. His voice had the particular brightness it got when he was talking about money, and Cascade controls the financing line for North Star. Without their sign-off, we cannot close. I have been told the Nash successor is going to be at the summit. I would give anything for one dinner with that family. A pause. He laughed. I know. Old money. Serious money. The kind that doesn't show up in Forbes. The kind that actually moves things. Maya stood in the hallway. She was, as a matter of legal record, the Nash successor. Cascade Capital's approval was hers to give. The deal Daniel had been describing as the defining moment of his career could not close without her signature. She had known this since Theo's call, and she had been thinking about it every day since. Now she stood 10 feet from her husband, while he described the most important person in his professional life, and the person he described was the woman he had moved into the guest room. She went to the kitchen and made herself a cup of tea. She stood at the counter while it steeped and listened to Daniel laugh again in the next room. She thought, "He is begging me. He does not know it yet." She picked up her tea and went back to the guest room. That night she sat on the edge of the bed and took out the notebook. She turned to the current page and looked at what she had written that week. The words were factual, dated, precise. She had spent years in hospital administration, and she knew how to document things in a way that held up. She read through the list of what had been removed, what had been changed, what had been said in her presence and in her absence. Then she added, Cascade Capital, North Star, Nash successor, Summit. He said he would give anything. She underlined the last 3 words and closed the notebook. In the morning, her insurance card was declined at the pharmacy. She was there to pick up the anti-nausea medication that made the difference between managing her treatment and not. The pharmacist ran it twice and looked at her with the carefully neutral expression that pharmacy staff develop for delivering bad news. "It's showing inactive," she said. "Can you call your insurance provider?" Maya paid cash. She thanked the pharmacist. She walked to her car, sat for a moment in the front seat, and then took out her phone. She photographed the receipt. She photographed the declined transaction slip. She sent both to Theo with a single line. "Find out who changed this." She did not go back inside and confront Daniel. She did not call Patricia or Helen. She drove home, took her medication, and sat at the desk in the guest room with her hands folded and her eyes clear. She was learning what kind of people she had married into. She was also learning that what she had always suspected was true. They were very good at believing she had no power. They were about to discover what patience looked like in someone who did. The night Theo called, Maya lay in the guest room and thought about her mother. Eleanor Nash had never been a woman who announced herself. That was the thing people missed when they tried to understand her, and most people did miss it, because most people were looking for the kind of power that announces itself. Eleanor's was the other kind, the kind that moves quietly, that signs the papers that make things possible, that sits in the back of the room and knows exactly which levers to pull when the time is right. She had built Nash Family Holdings over 30 years, starting with a single warehouse property in Charlotte and ending with a portfolio that touched pharmaceutical research, technology infrastructure, and real estate across 7 states. She had done it without a press release or an interview, without a profile in any business magazine, without once appearing on a list of any kind. "I don't need them to know my name," she told Maya once. "I need them to know my character." She was sitting at the kitchen table in the house where Maya grew up, drinking tea the same way she did everything, with complete attention and no hurry. The money is a test. Watch who passes. Maya had been 24 that day, newly graduated from her hospital administration program, newly convinced that she understood the world well enough to navigate it. She had thought her mother was being dramatic. She had not been. Eleanor built slowly. She acquired companies that had been undervalued, usually because no one had looked carefully at what they actually owned. She restructured quietly. She sold at the right time and bought when no one else was buying. She made Theodore Jerez her assistant attorney when he was 32 and she was 40, and he had been managing her affairs for 26 years by the time she died. She left him instructions so thorough that Theo once told Maya it was like a manual for operating a city. Everything anticipated, everything documented, everything already solved. Maya had been a hospital administrator when her mother got sick. She had taken leave to care for her. Eleanor was precise even about dying. She had her doctors give her information in full. She made her decisions methodically, and in her final weeks she sat with Maya every afternoon and transferred everything she knew. The business, the lawyers, the accounts, the philosophy. You don't have to use any of it the way I used it, she said. I built it so you would have choices, not so you would be rich, so you would be free. Eleanor died on a Tuesday in March, 2 years before the story begins. In her will, everything went to Maya. Nash Family Holdings in its entirety. All subsidiaries, all accounts, all positions. Cascade Capital, the private investment arm with its active deal book. 41 active investments. A board of managing directors who had known Eleanor for decades and who received Maya's appointment with a formality that told her immediately they had been prepared for this. Theo walked her through every piece of it over the following weeks. He was patient. He was thorough. He asked nothing of her except that she take her time. She had not told Daniel. In the months after her mother's death, she had thought about it many times. She had turned the conversation over in her mind, tried different starting points, different framings. But there was always the same hesitation, not shame, not secrecy for its own sake, but something quieter than that. She had watched Daniel's ambitions sharpen over the years of their marriage. She had seen the way he spoke about money, about power, about the people who had it versus the people who did not. And something in her had wanted more time to know. Her mother's voice always just behind the decision. Let them show you who they are first. She had given him time. He had used it to show her. 8 months after Eleanor died, Maya was diagnosed. Stage 3 breast cancer. Her oncologist was direct about what that meant. Aggressive treatment, real stakes, a timeline that could not be moved or compressed. She had sat in the oncologist's office alone. Daniel had a meeting he could not reschedule, and taken the information like her mother took information, with full attention and no performance of feeling in front of people she had just met. She saved the feeling for later. She called Theo on the way home. She told him what the diagnosis was and asked him to make sure the trust documents were airtight, just in case. Then she had told Daniel. She watched his face, and she saw a calculation she had never seen before. Not grief, not fear, a calculation. She had not said anything about what she saw. She had simply filed it in the same part of her mind where she kept her most important records. That was when the watching began in earnest. She had watched him through every round of chemo. She had watched the distance grow between them, the later nights, the new name that came up in conversations, the particular way he looked through her when she came into a room. She had watched him stop asking how she felt and start asking when she would be feeling better. She had watched him the way you watch a person who is showing you something important, and she had known, with the certainty her mother had taught her to trust, that she would know when it was time. The sealed letter sat in her bag through all of it, Eleanor Nash's handwriting on the front. Open when they show you who they are. Maya had put it there the day she cleared Eleanor's desk. She had not been ready to open it when Eleanor died. She was not ready on any of the treatment days that followed. She had carried it through 8 months of chemo and 2 moves between guest rooms and all the quiet rearrangements of her house, and she had not opened it. She was not ready yet, but she was getting close. She turned off the light in the guest room at 10 o'clock. On the other side of the wall, the sound of a television. Jessica's laugh, then Daniel's. The ordinary sounds of an ordinary evening. None of them knew who he was. None of them had asked. In the morning, she was going to Theo's office. She was going to sit across from a man who had known Eleanor Nash for 26 years, and who had called her Mrs. Nash-Reeves from the day she inherited that name, and who had something to show her about the North Star deal. She already had a sense of what it was. She had been watching Daniel's calls carefully enough to piece it together. But she wanted to see the numbers. She wanted to see the paperwork. She wanted to understand exactly how deep the irony went before she decided what to do with it. She lay in the guest room her husband had assigned her and thought about Eleanor Nash, who had built a fortune quietly, specifically so no one could ever throw her daughter away. They had thrown her into the guest room. They had no idea what they were holding. Theo Hayes kept an office on the 14th floor of a building that had no sign on the outside, which was exactly the kind of office that managed the kind of money he managed. The receptionist recognized Maya without being told who she was. She was offered tea before she sat down. The whole room was the kind of quiet that only serious, old, and very private money tends to produce. Theo came in carrying a folder and a laptop. He was 63, precise in his movements, and he had the particular quality that Maya had always appreciated in him. He did not treat her like someone who needed things explained to her. He sat down across from her, opened the folder, and began. Nash Family Holdings. Current portfolio. He turned the folder so she could read it. Total managed assets across all subsidiaries and investment vehicles. He tapped a figure at the top of the first page. Maya looked at the number. She had seen it before. Theo sent quarterly summaries, but seeing it printed in a room like this, on a morning like this, with the context of the past week behind her, made it land differently. The liquid position alone, Theo said. Not including the trust structure, I know, Maya said. She turned the page. Cascade Capital. Theo opened his laptop. Active deal book. Current quarter. He turned the screen so she could see the dashboard, a clean grid of ongoing transactions, each with its status, counterparties, and required approvals. He scrolled to the third entry. She found it without him pointing to it. Northstar Technologies acquisition. $400 M facility. Lead financing partner, Cascade Share. 51% required approval for close. M. Chen-Reeves, trustee. Below it in the notes column, expedited approval request received. 3 separate inquiries from Reeves Capital Management. Most recent, 14 days ago. Maya looked at the screen for a moment. Then she looked at Theo. He doesn't know, she said. No. Theo's voice was even. His intake communications have been handled through our standard intake desk. We have not identified ourselves beyond Cascade Capital's name, which is a subsidiary name not publicly linked to Nash Holdings in any searchable record. As far as his team is concerned, they are in communication with a private investment firm, and he's been pushing for expedited approval. Theo slid a printed email across the desk. The header was Reeves Capital Management letterhead. The sender was Daniel's name. The message was professional, polished, and unmistakably desperate in the way that sophisticated desperation always is. All the right language, asking too urgently. He had sent 3 like it. The most recent one contained a sentence that Maya read twice. This acquisition represents the most significant transaction of my career, and I want the Nash family to know that their support will not be forgotten. She set the email down. Without Cascade Capital's approval, Theo said, the acquisition cannot close. Northstar's other financing sources cover 49% of the facility. Without our 51%, there is no majority financing commitment, no deal closing, no transactions. The Northstar board has a hard deadline. If the facility is not committed and approved by the date of the investor summit, the target company will withdraw. When is the summit? 17 days from today. At the Aldrich Hotel, Maya looked out the window. Below, the city moved with the comfortable indifference of a city that had seen everything and would see everything again. There's something else, Theo said. She looked back at him. I had a routing review run on your insurance coverage this week, per your message about the declined card. He opened a second section of the folder. Your health coverage was modified 12 days ago. The modification removed you from the primary policyholder position and changed your plan status to inactive. He set a form in front of her. The change was submitted by the named policyholder with a signed authorization form. I didn't sign that, Maya said. I know. Theo's voice did not change. I had a preliminary handwriting review done this morning. The signature on the authorization form does not match your signature on file with our estate documents, your hospital intake forms, or any other document where your signature appears. The letter formations are similar, but not identical. The pressure pattern is wrong. Maya looked at the form, her name, in handwriting that was not quite hers. The date, 9 days ago. What does that mean, legally? She said. A fraudulent insurance authorization is a serious matter. If it were submitted by someone who forged your signature, that is fraud. If it was submitted by someone who had access to your identifying information and did so without your consent, that is also fraud. He paused. We do not yet know who submitted it. We are looking. Maya folded her hands on the table. She thought of Daniel in the home office, bright with excitement about the deal. She thought of Jessica standing in her kitchen, perfectly at ease. She thought of the way Patricia had hugged her at the door, and then turned immediately to the question of the new duvet. She thought of her mother's voice. They will show you who they are. Let them. I don't want to do anything yet, Maya said. I want to understand the full picture before I move. Theo nodded. He had known Eleanor Nash for 26 years. He had inherited Maya with the same patience and precision he brought to everything Eleanor had trusted him with. He did not push. What do you want me to do? Keep documenting? The insurance form, the signature analysis, his intake emails, everything. She picked up the email Daniel had sent, the one with its careful desperation barely contained, and read the last sentence again. The Nash family will know that their support will not be forgotten. She put it back in the folder. He's been talking about this deal constantly, she said. He doesn't know I can hear him. Theo waited. He said he would give anything for one meeting with the Nash family. She met Theo's eyes. He's been having it. He just doesn't know it yet. Theo was quiet for a moment. The investor summit, he said carefully. Several of Eleanor's founding investors will be present, the North Star board. Several of the major partners Cascade Capital has worked with over the years. It is, in a sense, exactly the kind of room where Nash Family Holdings was always meant to be represented. Maya understood what he was saying without his saying it. How long until the signature analysis is conclusive? She asked. 4 days, Theo said. 5 at the outside. And the insurance claim? She said. Can my coverage be reinstated? We can have it restored within 24 hours. I'll begin the process today. She nodded. She stood, and Theo stood with her, and he walked her to the door with the same quiet formality he had always shown. At the threshold, he said, Mrs. Nash-Reeves, whatever you decide to do, your mother anticipated this. She left you prepared. Maya looked at him. I know, she said. That's what keeps me going. She went home to the guest room, and she did not say anything to Daniel about where she had been. That evening, Daniel passed her in the kitchen hallway, phone to his ear, moving with the particular energy of a man who believes everything is going according to plan. He did not look at her. He was already talking about the next meeting, the next call, the next step toward the thing he wanted most. He was 4 feet away from it. He would not know that for another 15 days. Daniel came to the guest rooms on a Sunday morning, carrying a folder and wearing the expression of a man who believed he was being reasonable. Maya was at the small desk by the window. She had her notebook open and a cup of tea that had gone cold. She turned when he knocked on the door. He knocked, which told her immediately that he wanted something. Do you have a minute? He said. She gestured to the chair. He sat down and set the folder on the desk between them. He was practiced at this, at entering a room with a predetermined outcome and making it appear to be a conversation. She had been watching him do it in board meetings for years, though she had never told him she was watching. The lawyers put together something, he said, a voluntary asset separation agreement. He opened the folder and turned it toward her. Given everything that's happening, your health, the uncertainty, the treatment timeline, they thought it made sense to formalize things. Just to protect both of us. She picked up the document. It was 11 pages. She began reading from the top. Daniel filled the silence. It's standard language. Basically, if there's ever a question about management of any shared business interests during a period of incapacitation, for lack of a better word, this puts everything under a single administrative authority. Keeps things clean. She kept reading. The document was not standard. The language was careful in the way that very deliberately written traps are careful. Plausible at first read, damaging at close read. By page 4, she had found it. Any trust interest held jointly or pending full legal documentation would, under the terms of the agreement, be administered by the designated trustee named herein. The designated trustee named herein was Daniel James Reeves. She turned to page 7. A clause she read twice. Any financial interest in private investment vehicles where as not documentation has not been registered in both parties' names may be classified as a pending undocumented interest and thus subject to the terms above. Nash Family Holdings had not been registered in Daniel's name. It was not marital property. Theo had been clear on that. Eleanor's structuring had been clear on that. But in the hands of a certain kind of lawyer, pending undocumented interest was language flexible enough to argue almost anything. If Maya signed this, she gave Daniel a foothold to contest her standing as sole trustee of Nash Family Holdings. She gave him the argument, even if a court would eventually reject it, that there was a period during which the trust's administration was in question. She understood exactly what this was. "I'll need my attorney to look at it," she said. Daniel's expression shifted, just slightly, the way a person's expression shifts when they have anticipated a response and are now executing the plan for it. "It's really standard, Maya. You can have someone look at it, but it'll say the same thing." "Then it won't take long," she said. He picked up the folder. His face was doing something complicated, trying to stay pleasant while managing something that was not pleasant at all. "I'll need it back by next week. There are timelines I'm working with." "I understand," she said. He left. She heard him on the phone in the hallway. Within 30 seconds, his voice low and clipped, and she understood that whoever was on the other end of that call had been waiting. She photographed every page of the agreement and sent it to Theo with a message. "See the clause on page 4 and page 7. She did not need to explain more than that. Theo had been managing estate documents for 26 years. He would see it in under a minute. He called her back in 4. "The clause on pencil 7 is the target," he said without preamble. "If you sign this, and someone makes the argument that Nash Family Holdings falls under pending undocumented interest, which it does not, legally, but the argument could be made in a motion, they could temporarily challenge your trustee status during litigation. The key word is temporarily. You would prevail. But the investor summit is in 12 days. If your trustee status is being litigated at the time of the summit, your ability to formally withdraw Cascade Capital's approval could be contested." Maya understood. A contested approval was almost as good as no approval, from the deal's perspective. North Star's board would not close on a deal with a finance question mark hanging over it. "They want me to sign it before the summit," she said. "Yes," Theo said, "and they want it done in the next week, which would give them time to file the challenge before the investor date." "He didn't think of this on his own," she said. Theo was quiet for a moment. "I would not think so. The language is too specific. Someone with knowledge of deal structuring drafted this." That night, through the guest room wall, she heard them arguing. She stood in the hallway in the dark and listened. Jessica's voice first, sharp and low. "She's not going to sign it, I told you. She's not going to do it without being pushed." Daniel. "She will. She doesn't have any leverage." "Jessica, you're not thinking about this right. The summit is 12 days away. If she still has legal standing when the investors, Daniel." "She doesn't have standing. She has nothing. She's sick, she's behind on her treatment, and she's been living in the guest room for 2 weeks. What exactly is she going to do?" A pause. Then Jessica's voice, quieter, with a precision that the anger had cleared the way for. "You don't know her as well as you think." Silence. Maya went back to the guest room. She sat on the edge of the bed. She looked at the wall for a long moment, and she thought about what Jessica had just said. She thought about it carefully, because it was the only honest thing anyone in that house had said about her in a very long time. "You don't know her as well as you think." No, Maya thought. He doesn't. She opened her notebook. She turned to a clean page and wrote, "Jessica knows something. She does not know what she knows, but she is paying attention." She underlined it. Then she wrote one more thing and circled it, 12 days. Maya called Ruth on a Monday. It was 8 in the morning, early enough that the house was still quiet, and she stepped outside into the back garden with her coffee and her phone. Ruth answered on the second ring the way she always did, like she'd been expecting the call and had no time to waste on unnecessary waiting. "Miss Maya," Ruth said. Not a question, a recognition. "Ruth, I need to ask you something. About the week before I came home from the hospital." Maya kept her voice steady. "I need to know what you saw." Ruth was quiet for a moment. Not hesitating, collecting. "I've been waiting," Ruth said. "I want you to know that." "I didn't know what to do except wait. Tell me." "The Tuesday before you came home," Ruth said. I came for my regular day. There were movers. She said it plainly, with the economy of someone who had rehearsed the facts and knew to let them stand on their own. 2 trucks. They took the bedroom furniture, the set you and Mr. Reeves had since the early years, the dresser and the headboard and the 2 nightstands. They took it all. Maya did not speak. His mother was there. And the woman, Miss Ford. They were directing the movers. Miss Ford had samples out for new furniture. She had them pinned to the wall above where the headboard used to be, choosing fabrics. Like it was a decorator's appointment. Ruth paused. I heard them on the phone with the consignment house. About the pricing. There was a receipt. Did you keep it? Maya said. I photographed it, Ruth said, with my phone. The date on the receipt is 11 days before you came home from your 4th round of treatment. Maya set down her coffee. She looked at the garden she had planted with the full understanding that she might not always be able to tend it. They were planning while you were still in that hospital bed, Ruth said. Her voice had not changed in tone. She did not need to make it dramatic. The fact was dramatic enough on its own. I want you to know that. I thought you needed to know that. I did, Maya said. Thank you, Ruth. Is there something I can sign? Ruth said. A statement. Something official. Yes, Maya said. I'll have my attorney contact you. His name is Theo Hayes. All right, Ruth said. She paused. Miss Maya, when this is over, whatever you need, you just call. Maya thanked her again and ended the call. She stood in the garden for a moment. The cold had turned overnight. The early morning air had the clarity that comes before a weather change. She picked up her coffee. The furniture had been sold while she was in the hospital, before she came home, before Daniel had told her anything, before any of the careful, compassionate language about what was best for her recovery or less stressful for everyone. The displacement had been planned and executed before she ever walked through the door and found the coat on her hook. She called Theo. He answered on the first ring. She had begun to think he might always answer on the first ring when her name came up on his screen. Ruth Parsons, she said. Daniel's housekeeper. She comes twice a week. She has a photographed receipt from a furniture consignment house. The date is 11 days before I came home from the hospital. The furniture was from our bedroom. It was sold while I was still in treatment. Theo's silence was brief and expressive. That is premeditation, he said. That is not a grieving husband who made impulsive decisions. That is a documented, dated timeline of a planned removal. Combined with the forged insurance form, Maya said. Combined with the asset separation agreement. He was quiet for another moment. Mrs. Nash-Reeves, I want to be honest with you about where we are. The forged insurance signature, my handwriting analyst finalized his report this morning. It is definitive. That is not your signature. If we report it to prosecutors, which I believe we will need to do, there is sufficient basis for a fraud charge. Maya exhaled. She had known it was coming. She had known it for days. It still landed. The asset separation agreement, Theo continued, is not criminal on its face. It's aggressive legal strategy, but combined with the forged document, it suggests a pattern that a good prosecutor could argue, was aimed at stripping you of legal standing before the summit. Who submitted the change? Maya said. Did you find out? The modification was filed by a third party, using your policy number and a signed authorization form. The form lists a fax transmission from an external number. We traced the number. A pause. It is registered to a business address that is also used by Jessica Ford's private consulting company. Maya was very still. She filed it, Maya said. The submission came through her company's system, Theo said carefully. We cannot be 100% certain who physically did the filing, but the pathway is clear. Maya turned this over in her mind. She thought about the argument she had overheard through the wall. She thought about the careful way Jessica had stood in her kitchen on the first day, with the ease of someone who had been inside that house many times before, not as a guest, but as a planner. She thought, Jessica is not just a woman who wants my husband. She is a woman who made a calculation about what my husband could get her and who has been managing that calculation since before I came home. Keep all of it, Maya said. The handwriting report, the insurance filing trace, Ruth's statement, the furniture receipt, Daniel's intake emails to Cascade Capital. She thought for a moment. And get me the original founding investor list for North Star. My mother was an early investor. I want to see whether Nash Family Holdings is on the original Summit guest list. I already pulled it, Theo said. Eleanor Nash's name is on the list. She RSVP'd for the founding investor dinner 3 years ago, when North Star was still early stage. The invitation was extended in perpetuity to the Nash family trustee. Maya absorbed that. Eleanor had been in that room, or meant to be, before Daniel had ever heard the company's name. Then I'm already invited, Maya said. You were always supposed to be there, Theo said simply. She ended the call. She stood in the garden for another moment, in the cold morning air, in the yard of the house that was in her name. Above her, the guest room window. Above that, the master bedroom where her furniture used to be. She thought about Eleanor sitting in her boardroom at 40, being told she was out of her depth. She thought about what Eleanor did next. Then Maya went inside, opened her notebook, and wrote at the top of a clean page, 8 days. 8 days before the summit, Maya sat in Theo's office for the second time and looked at the case spread across his conference table. It was organized the way Theo organized everything, by category, by date, with tabs and indices. Ruth's written statement. The photographed furniture receipt, enlarged to show the date clearly. The handwriting analysis, 12 pages. With the examiner's conclusion highlighted on the first page and documented in detail on the next 11. Daniel's 3 intake emails to Cascade Capital, printed on Cascade Capital's internal letterhead. The insurance modification form with the forged signature and the traced fax number side by side. And at the top of the pile, the founding investor letter from North Star Technologies, addressed to Eleanor Nash. Dated 3 years ago, inviting the Nash family trustee to the inaugural investor summit and all subsequent annual gatherings thereof. Maya looked at each document in turn. Then she sat back. What happens if I walk in with all of this? She said. Theo had been expecting the question. To the summit specifically. Cascade Capital withdraws its approval. The North Star deal loses its majority financing commitment. The board has a hard, close deadline. They will not extend it under these circumstances, not with a contested financing partner and the circumstances we would be laying out for the room. He paused. The deal dies, publicly, in front of every investor, every partner, and every board member Daniel has cultivated over with the past 3 years. He said it without inflection. Yes. Maya looked at the founding investor letter, her mother's name at the top of the address line. And the forgery, she said. After the summit, we report the insurance modification to federal prosecutors. Forging a signature on a federal insurance form is a serious matter. Combined with the submission pathway through Jessica Ford's company, the prosecutors will investigate both of them. The outcome depends on what they find and what cooperation they receive, but the basis for charges against one or both of them is solid. The asset separation agreement, Maya said. What happens to that? Without your signature, it has no legal effect. He cannot compel you to sign it. And once the summit has occurred and your identity as Nash Trust trustee is a matter of public record, any future attempt to contest your standing would be, I'll put it plainly, very difficult to take seriously. Maya nodded. She was methodical about this, the way she had been methodical about everything, reviewing each piece of information until she had absorbed it fully and could hold it without needing to look at the paper again. This was what her mother had taught her, and what her years in hospital administration had reinforced. The facts do not become more or less true depending on how you feel about them. You learn the facts, then you decide what to do. There's one more thing I want you to look into, she said. Jessica Ford. I want to understand what she's actually positioned herself for, not what Daniel thinks she's there for, what she's actually been doing. Theo opened a slim folder at the end of the table. I had our research team pull her professional record and recent filings. He slid it toward her. Miss Ford is a strategist by background. She has been involved in 3 previous acquisitions, all as a behind-the-scenes advisor rather than a named party. In one case, she took an equity position in the acquired company through a third-party holding entity. The position was not publicly disclosed at the time of the transaction. Maya looked at the filing, a holding entity. Jessica's name buried 3 levels down. She has been trying to get an equity position in North Star, Maya said. It was not a question. The structure of what she has done before strongly suggests it, Theo said. If Daniel's North Star acquisition closed, she would have been in a position to negotiate a carried interest or equity stake through a consulting arrangement, which is why the summit timing matters to her as much as it does to him. He paused. What Jessica Ford wants is not your husband. What she wants is to be in the room when the deal closes, and to have her name on the right document when it does. Maya set the folder down. She thought about the argument through the wall again. You don't know her as well as you think. Jessica had not said that out of defensiveness. She had said it because she was genuinely uncertain, because she had been watching Maya the way Maya had been watching all of them, and she had noticed something she could not explain. Something in the steadiness. 8 days. Maya was inside a week now. That evening, Daniel came to find her again. He stood in the guest room doorway, with the folder tucked under his arm. The same folder, she assumed, though she could not see the tabs. I still need that agreement back, he said. He was trying to sound light about it and not quite managing. The attorneys are asking. I'm still reviewing it, she said. I told you my attorney needed to look at it. His jaw tightened. Maya, you don't have an attorney. I have Theo Hayes, she said. A beat. Theodore Hayes is your estate attorney. He handles your mother's affairs. He handles mine, she said simply. Daniel looked at her for a moment with an expression she had not seen on him before, something between frustration and the first edge of unease. He had miscalculated something, somewhere, and he was beginning to feel it without being able to name it. I need it before the summit, he said. I understand, she said. He left. She heard him on the phone in the hallway before he reached the stairs. She says she has a lawyer. Hayes, Theodore Hayes. A pause. I don't know. Look him up. Maya turned back to her notebook. She thought, they will look up Theo. Theo managed Eleanor Nash's estate for 26 years, but not publicly. His firm does not advertise. His clients' names do not appear in any public record. They'll find him. They will not find what he manages. She wrote, 7 days. Then she opened her mother's letter, not the sealed one, not yet, but a photocopy Theo had made of the original will, which she kept in the back pocket of the notebook. She read one paragraph near the end, which she had read many times before. She will know when to act. She has always known. I built this so she would not have to hurry. She closed the notebook. She set her alarm for 6. In 7 days, she was going to the Aldrich Hotel, and she was going to say her name in a room full of people who had been told it mattered. It would matter. Eleanor Nash had seen to that. The night before the summit, the house was quiet in a way that felt deliberate. Daniel had taken Jessica to dinner, an early celebration she'd heard Patricia say on the phone. Patricia and Helen were meeting them there. Maya had declined the invitation she'd never been given. She ate what she could manage, took her medication, and sat at the small guest room desk as the evening came down. She had the sealed envelope in her hands, Eleanor Nash's handwriting on the front. Open when they show you who they are. She had carried it since the day she cleared her mother's desk. She had held it through 8 months of treatment and 2 weeks of displacement, and every cold morning in this guest room. She had not been ready. She had kept knowing she would know when she was. She opened it, 1 page. Her mother's handwriting, careful, unhurried, the particular slant of a woman who had been deliberate her entire life. Maya read it once without breathing. Then she read it again. My girl, if you are reading this, they have shown you who they are. Good. Now you know too. I always knew you would know when the time came, because I raised you to watch, and you have always watched better than anyone gives you credit for. Everything I built so that no one could ever throw you away. So that your value would not depend on what someone else was willing to assign to it. You were never small. They only needed you to believe it. Walk in. Stand up. Say your name. I have got you, even now. Maya held the letter for a long time. She did not cry. She pressed it against her sternum for a moment, the way she used to lean against her mother's shoulder when she was young, and then she folded it along its creases and set it carefully on the desk. She took out her one good dress, the navy one she'd bought the spring before the diagnosis, the one she had barely worn. It still fit. Shimo had changed some things, but not this. She laid it over the back of the chair and looked at it for a while, deciding. Then she took out the silk scarf. Not her oldest one, not the one she sometimes wore to feel less exposed, but the good one, deep blue, her mother's favorite color, which Maya had taken from Eleanor's drawer the week she died, and kept for no reason she could have articulated except that it seemed important to have something her mother had worn. She folded it lengthwise and practiced the tie twice until it fell the way she wanted. She called Theo. He answered on the first ring. "I'll be there at 9, she said. "The summit opens at 10. I want to go through the documents one more time before we walk in." "Everything is ready," he said. "The copies are printed and collated. Enough for every investor at the table, plus extras." A pause. Mrs. Nash-Reeves. "Are you ready?" She thought about what ready had looked like at various points in her life. Ready for her first day at the hospital. Ready for the news the oncologist had given her in a room she sat in alone. Ready for the morning she'd come home to find a coat on her hook. "My mother built this for exactly this moment," she said. "Yes, I'm ready." She ended the call. She sat on the edge of the guest bed for a while. The room was small. A week ago she had hated it. Now she thought she would remember it, the way you remember places where something inside you shifted. She thought about Eleanor sitting in a warehouse on her first real estate acquisition, going over the numbers one more time while the man who'd told her she was out of her depth was across town at someone else's dinner. She thought about what Eleanor did next. There was a knock on the door. She knew who it was before he spoke. Daniel came in without being invited. He had been drinking, not badly, but enough that the careful pleasantness he usually maintained had slipped a degree. He sat down in the chair without asking. He looked at the dress on the chair back and at the scarf on the desk, and something moved through his face that she could not name. "Sign the agreement tonight," he said. His voice had lost its earlier performance of reasonableness. "If you sign it before tomorrow, I can make sure you're taken care of. A settlement. Monthly support. You won't have to worry about money or treatment costs or any of it." Maya looked at him. She had known this man for 9 years. She had believed him once, to be the person she'd thought he was becoming. She had sat with him through his worst nights, the deal that fell apart, the year his company nearly went under, the period when his confidence had collapsed, and she had held him through it. She had given him everything she had to give, and kept nothing back. She had let him believe he was building their life, because she thought it was what love looked like, and now he was sitting across from her offering her a settlement. "You forged my name on a federal form, Daniel," she said. "You had my insurance coverage terminated while I was in cancer treatment, and you've been trying to use a legal document to strip me of assets you don't know exist." She was quiet. She did not raise her voice. "What exactly would you like me to sign?" He stared at her. The performance dropped away entirely. "Grief makes people see things that aren't there. That's a very specific thing to say," she said. "Maya. No one is going to believe a sick woman over." He stopped himself, recalibrated. The smoothness came back, but slowly, like putting on a coat that no longer fit quite right. "I'm trying to take care of you." "I know," she said. "That's what I'm counting on." He stood. He looked at her one more time, with something that might have been the first flicker of real uncertainty, and then he walked out. She heard him on the stairs, and then the house was quiet again. She turned back to the desk. She looked at the folded letter. She looked at the dress. She looked at her notebook, open to the page where she had written, in small clean letters, "Say your name." Tomorrow she would. She put out the light. She lay down in the guest room where they had put her, in the house she had always owned, and she slept for the first time in weeks without any effort at all. The Aldrich Hotel's grand ballroom held 400 people, and the particular energy of a room where everyone believed something important was about to happen for them. Maya arrived at 9. Theo was already there, standing near the entrance to the pre-summit reception with 2 colleagues from his firm, all 3 of them holding leather folders. He saw her across the lobby and came to her without being summoned. "How are you feeling?" he said. "Well enough," she said. He looked at her once carefully and gave a small nod. She had always appreciated that about him. He assessed things accurately and moved on. They went over the documents in a side room off the lobby. Everything was in order. Her credentials as Nash Family Holdings trustee, The Cascade Capital deal authorizations, the founding investor letter with Eleanor's name, and the standing invitation. Theo walked her through the order of presentation. She listened. She asked 2 questions. He answered them. They were ready in 30 minutes. At 9:45, she went to the restroom and stood at the mirror. The navy dress sat right, the blue scarf tied in the fold she had practiced. She looked like her mother, not the way she usually noticed it, not around the eyes, not in the curve of her jaw, but something in the whole picture. A woman standing in a room where she was supposed to be, wearing a piece of blue silk that meant she had not come alone. She went back to the lobby. Theo fell in beside her. The summit opened at 10. The room filled steadily. Maya stood near the side wall with Theo and watched them come in. She saw Daniel arrive with Jessica at his side, both of them speaking to people easily, working the room the way they had apparently been doing this for years. Patricia and Helen came in together and found seats near the front. The North Star board took their positions at a long table to the right of the stage. The room was full of people who had been told that today was the day Daniel Reeves announced the most significant deal of his career. She recognized 3 faces across the room, men her mother had worked with, who had sat at Eleanor's table, who had known Nash Family Holdings from the inside. 2 of them were already watching her from across the ballroom. One of them, a man in his 70s with white hair and the bearing of someone who had been in important rooms for 50 years, caught her eye and gave a small, deliberate nod. She returned it. At 10:15, a moderator introduced Daniel. He took the stage with the ease of a man who had prepared for this moment his entire life. He was good at it, she had always known that. He spoke about North Star's technology, about the acquisition's strategic vision, about what it would mean for the industry. He used all the right language, built the right rhythm. He was compelling. She watched him the way she had always watched him, with attention, with patience, with the understanding that knowing someone well did not require loving what you knew. He said, "This acquisition would not be possible without the confidence of our financing partners." He said, "Nash Family Holdings and Cascade Capital have been central to bringing this deal to where it stands today." He said Eleanor's name as though it belonged to him. He said it the way people say names they have borrowed without asking, and the room responded with the respectful murmur of an audience that didn't know any better. The doors at the back of the room opened. Maya walked in. She walked the way her mother had taught her to walk into a room, without hurry, without announcement, without apology for the space she occupied. The room turned. A murmur moved through it, the kind that happens when something happens that wasn't on the agenda. Daniel looked up from the stage. His face did what she had known it would do. It froze. The 3 men she had recognized across the room, the 2 who had already seen her, and a third who turned at the sound of the murmur, all 3 of them rose to their feet. Not theatrically, quietly. The way people rise when they recognize who has walked in and understand what it means. Maya. Daniel's voice came through the microphone. Flat. "This is a private event." She stopped at the center of the room. The whole space had contracted around that single exchange. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," she said. Her voice was not loud. It didn't need to be. The room leaned in. "You just said a name. Daniel. Nash Family Holdings. Cascade Capital." She let the room be quiet for 1 beat. "Do you want to know who holds the trust?" He said nothing. His mouth had gone slightly open. Theo stepped forward from behind her and addressed the room with the calm of a man who had been waiting for this moment for exactly as long as he had needed to. For the investors present, the named successor of Nash Family Holdings and sole trustee of Cascade Capital. The financing partner without which this acquisition cannot close, Mrs. Maya Chen-Reeves. The room broke into sound. "Daniel, you can't, that's not." Patricia from the front row. "This is a stunt." She is confused. She doesn't have legal standing. Maya looked at her mother-in-law for 1 moment. Then she turned back to the room. "I am the woman behind the money my husband has spent a year begging for," she said. She kept her voice level. She did not perform anything, she simply spoke. "I am the person he moved out of our home while I was in chemotherapy. The person whose insurance coverage was canceled with a forged signature while I was in treatment." She turned slightly toward the Northwest board. Cascade Capital hereby withdraws its approval of the North Star acquisition. This deal does not close. Not through him. Not ever. Daniel came off the stage. Maya, you don't understand what you're doing. I understand exactly what I'm doing, she said. She did not step back. Theo was already moving through the room, distributing copies to investors and board members. The handwriting analysis, the fraudulent insurance form, the furniture consignment receipt dated 11 days before Maya came home, Daniel's own intake emails to Cascade Capital, his words begging in front of everyone he had ever wanted to impress. The room had gone very quiet. Then Jessica moved. She had been standing to the left of the stage. She had gone still the moment the doors opened, and she had stayed still through everything that followed, in the way that a person goes still when they are rapidly recalculating. Maya watched her from across the room and understood that Jessica had known this was possible, had warned Daniel it was possible, and was now making the only decision that would protect her. Jessica stepped forward. She did not look at Daniel. She looked at the room. For the record, she said clearly, her voice carrying without effort, the signature on the insurance modification was filed through my company's system. It was not my decision to forge it. I was asked to facilitate the filing. She looked at Daniel now briefly with something that was not remorse. I am not going to prison for choices I was asked to make on someone else's behalf. She set her phone on the long table nearest to her. It was unlocked and open to a conversation thread. Every instruction in his words. The room absorbed it. 100 people looked at a phone sitting on a table and understood what it meant. Daniel stood in the center of the ballroom. His mother had stepped back from him. Helen had put down her glass. The North Star board was conferring with their legal counsel. The investors who had risen to their feet for Maya had not sat down. He had spent 9 years building toward this room. He had spent 2 weeks dismantling a marriage to get here unencumbered. He had believed, with the confidence of a man who had never been wrong about what he was owed, that today was the day he would become the person he had always decided he was going to be. He looked at Maya. His voice, when it came, was small in a way his voice had never been before. You were sick. I thought you were dying, she said. I know. She met his eyes without cruelty and without warmth, the way you look at a fact that has finally been said aloud. I might be, but I am not gone, and I was never yours to throw away. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. She turned and walked toward the doors, and the whole room watched her go. The woman they had all just learned had been holding everything while they looked at nothing. Theo caught up to her in the corridor. She stopped. She was breathing carefully, deliberately, the way she had learned to breathe through the hardest moments of her treatment. Your mother would have stood exactly where you just stood, he said. Maya looked toward the ballroom doors. She could hear the sound of the room behind them, voices, chairs scraping, the controlled chaos of a world coming apart along its true lines. She thought of Eleanor Nash, who had spent 30 years building the room Maya had just walked into, who had put her name on a guest list 3 years ago, and then died before she could use it. I know, Maya said quietly. She built the room. She walked out of the Aldrich Hotel into the morning, in her navy dress and her mother's blue silk scarf, and she did not look back. The deal collapsed within 48 hours. North Star's board issued a statement citing unresolved financing irregularities and withdrew the acquisition offer. 3 years of Daniel's work, gone in language that left no room for appeal. Theo filed the insurance fraud report with federal prosecutors the following week. The fraudulent notarization was well documented, the submission pathway clear. Both Daniel and Jessica were named as subjects of an investigation. Jessica had handed over everything voluntarily, every email, every instruction, every communication, and the prosecutor assigned to the case told Theo's office that her cooperation was noted. It did not get her off. It kept her out of a cell. No firm in the city would hire her for a long time. Daniel's life came apart along the lines where it had always been weak. He lost the deal. He lost the respect of the investors he had spent his career trying to impress, men and women who had watched, in a hotel ballroom, a man beg for something that belonged to his wife without knowing who his wife was. He lost the house, which had always been in Maya's name, a detail his attorneys discovered when they looked at the deed and could not find Daniel's name on it. He faced charges. He hired lawyers. He became a man who spent a lot of time explaining himself, which was, Maya thought, the most honest thing he had ever done. Patricia stopped calling. Helen sent a single text in the week after the summit. 2 words, a name, a quiet acknowledgement of something she could not bring herself to say in full. Maya did not reply. She did not need to. She went back to treatment. Her oncologist was direct about it, the way good oncologists are. The treatment needed to continue. Her response was being monitored, and they would know more in 3 months. 3 months was not a long time, and it was an eternity. Maya went to every appointment. Ruth Theo sent flowers once. She ate what she could manage and slept when she could, and moved through the days with the same methodical patience she had brought to everything else. She moved back into the master bedroom. She bought a new bed frame and left the walls, the pale gray Jessica had chosen, because she liked it. The notebook filled up by December. She started a new one. That winter, on a Tuesday in January, her oncologist called her into the office with results that were better than the last set, and then better still. They would not use the word remission until they were certain, but in February they used it. 1 word. Maya sat with it in the oncologist's office for a moment before she let herself feel it fully. Then she called Theo. He answered on the first ring, she told him. He did not speak for a moment, and when he did, his voice was not the voice of an estate attorney. It was the voice of a man who had known Eleanor Nash for 26 years and had just heard something Eleanor would have wanted to hear. Good, he said. Just that. Good. With Nash Family Holdings in her hands and her health in her hands and nothing left to wait for, Maya did what her mother had trusted her to do. She spent the spring working with Theo and Eleanor's board to establish the Eleanor Nash Foundation, a clinic and legal resource center for women navigating serious illness while facing financial abuse, document fraud, or family abandonment. Women who had been stripped of insurance coverage. Women whose assets had been frozen or forged away while they were too sick to notice. Women who had been put in guest rooms and told it was for their own good. The clinic opened on a Thursday in May. Maya tied her blue scarf and cut the ribbon in front of a small crowd that included Theo, Ruth, and 3 of Eleanor's original colleagues who had risen to their feet in the Aldrich Hotel ballroom. Ruth cried briefly. Maya did not. On the wall inside the entrance, in letters chosen to be large enough to read from across the room, were her mother's words. You were never small. They only needed you to believe it. That night she sat with Eleanor's letter, which was framed now on the wall of the master bedroom, the room she had moved back into, with the pale gray walls and the new bed frame and her grandmother's ceramic back on the kitchen counter where it belonged. She had found it in the storage bin in the hall closet, face down, right where Helen had put it. It was not damaged. She washed it and set it back in its place. She sat in the quiet of a house that was hers. She thought about the guest room and the cold mornings and the sounds of her own house coming through the wall. She had almost believed what they needed her to believe. She had been so close to being nothing more than what they had decided she was. She had been holding everything the whole time. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and let me know in the comments. What would you have done in that hotel ballroom if you were her?